everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. I've been seeing a lot of comments recently on my videos that point out an interesting idea that I hadn't formally thought of prior. That is, apologists seem to like to define what atheists are, do, think, feel, etc. This is one group telling their viewers, especially those who already agree with them, what another group is, does, thinks, feels, etc. So many times in my responses, I put forth corrections of these apologists' definitions or meaning of atheist or atheism. I'm likely not alone when I say, honestly, it's getting old. I don't tell these apologists what they think, nor do I define what their group must think or do. I only tell my viewers what these apologists are actually saying. If I am incorrect, I want to be shown to be incorrect so I can make better arguments in the future, and I don't mislead any of you. So I'm going to define what an atheist is, and with any luck, this will be the last time. An atheist is a person who does not accept the proposition some number of gods exist. While yes, there are some instances where it could also mean a person who accepts the proposition no gods exist, this is typically reserved for the most severe philosophical situations. When discussing atheism, I will never mean this meaning unless I agree with my interlocutor beforehand and make explicit that it is what I mean. I will use the term hard atheism as a distinction from the run-of-the-mill everyday meaning given previously. Unless I use hard, strong, or Gnostic, or some other qualifier like these, I am specifically referring to the general definition. Any objections? No? Good. Let's move on. The video for today is from a larger channel called Deflate. This gentleman, Lucas with a K, describes his goal as to challenge the skeptic, strengthen the believer, and create a space for awesome discussions about faith, etc. This isn't the first video I've seen of him, and he seems like a generally honest guy who talks about deeper philosophical topics than general apologists do. I hope he is understood well enough, as he does have a bit of an accent.
And I need to speak clearly, because for the first 5 minutes you'll probably go, got an English accent. I can't understand a word he's saying. How weird.
I'm going to check out his video, If Atheism is Not a Belief, It's Not True. A weird choice of capitalization here, which made reading it as it is typed fun. My initial thoughts on the title are, irrespective of whether something is a belief or not, it doesn't change reality. This looks like a bit of a word game though. Generally, a belief is an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. So, atheism would be a non-belief, that is, a lack of belief in the proposition. The proposition is either true or false. Atheism is saying that the proposition is not true, but not necessarily saying it is false either. By this, I suppose the title is correct, but specifically because atheism is not a truth claim, so by the meanings provided, it is not true, nor is it false. It also isn't a squirrel, which is just as relevant. Anyway, let's see what Lucas has to say. Maybe he can clear this up a bit.
Atheism is not a belief, but the mere lack of belief is what our atheist friends keep telling us. But if that's true, then atheism faces a tough logical hurdle, and in this video I will tell you why. Hi, I'm Lucas from Deflate, and this apologetics channel is all about pointing out why faith wins. If atheism is nothing but the absence of any belief or claim about God, this basically means that to speak of atheism
With bunny rabbit ears.
is to describe a psychological condition, namely the condition that the proposition God exists is not to be found in the atheist brain or mind.
This may be a bit of a nitpick, but it sounds like Lucas is saying that when examining what atheists think about, the proposition that a God exists is not among them. When a proposition is put forth, the atheist can still think about it. It is okay for atheists to not be sure and continuously evaluate the proposition, even if a conclusion is never formed one way or the other. Of course, he could also just be saying that the brain state that would include the acceptance of the position God exists doesn't exist. That seems more likely, so I'll go with that. It could just be a language thing.
And if atheism is essentially the absence of the proposition God exists,
it isn't. This is an example where trying to simplify the statement causes it to be incorrect. The lack of belief means the lack of the brain state where the acceptance would happen. The position still exists to potentially be considered, but the position itself is not accepted.
then carrots, the Eiffel Tower, and butterflies are atheists too.
I used to think this was the case because technically yes. If the only criteria were X doesn't accept the proposition, then sure, as carrots, the Eiffel Tower, and butterflies don't accept any proposition. However, this misses out on one key factor. In order for something to accept or not accept a proposition, there needs to be the cognitive ability to do so. That is, an ability to make an evaluation of the proposition. So, carrots, the Eiffel Tower, and butterflies cannot make evaluations of the proposition. They don't have the cognitive function in order to accept or not accept the proposition put forth. They're also not a-moonists, not because the moon doesn't exist, but because they don't have the ability to evaluate that proposition. The Eiffel Tower doesn't accept that the Earth is round, why not?
Now, a psychological condition is, of course, not the same thing as a claim. The difference may not be self-evident, so let me illustrate this with an example. Let's say I go hiking in the Swiss Alps with my wife, and suddenly I spot an eagle. Me getting excited and going, "Wow!" while pointing to the sky is representative of a psychological state, namely the state of excitement arising from the experience of spotting the eagle. It's not a truth claim about the eagle. However, when I put up a post on my Facebook wall that says, "I saw an eagle in the Alps today," I'm making a claim to truth, namely that eagles, or at least one eagle, exists in the Alps and that I went hiking there today.
Another bit nitpicky thing here, but in your story you mentioned hiking in the Alps, but in your claim, nowhere did you posit that you were hiking in the Alps, just that you were there. Maybe you were driving on a road through the Alps. Maybe you were using binoculars from a ski lodge. This may be a bit too pedantic, but if Lucas is going to try to make a very specific philosophical argument, he needs to be held to the same standards. Though I'll try not to do this again for this video.
Psychological states and truth claims are two categorically different things, and one of their key differences is this. Only claims have what philosophers call truth value. In plain English, this basically means that claims can be true or false. Psychological states, however, cannot be true or false. Instead, they just are. Going back to my example, it would be absurd to ask whether my excitement about that eagle is either true or false.
Maybe in some context, generally when it comes to how a subject thinks, feels, or believes, it is entirely subjective. So we take people at their word. We could challenge you on it, especially if the claim were more mundane. For example, I live in the US. If I go to the mall and say, "I saw a regular car on the road and it was exciting," you would probably go, "Really, Dark? Was it really exciting?" You likely wouldn't believe that I got honestly excited to see an ordinary automobile where one would expect an ordinary automobile to be. Now maybe if I had never seen a car before, or I was overwhelmingly interested in physical mechanics, then maybe, but I have seen a car before, and I'm not that excited by simply seeing technology that has been around since 1885 in some form or fashion. Eagles can be exciting. We know this because we have previous experience with eagles. They're a wonderful part of nature and the symbol of America. That is why we wouldn't ask you whether your excitement is true or false.
Instead, my excitement, like any other psychological state, such as anger, frustration, or joy, just is.
Well, not quite. We know emotions happen, and we know how they happen. We know seeing an eagle can cause excitement in some people. Emotions are natural. You were excited, and you don't need to prove it to anyone because it doesn't matter. If you saw an eagle and it made you experience a different emotion, no comments on this please, then it would be true that you experienced that emotion. The truth value of your psychological state is just accepted. We need to be careful when talking about the truth value of claims of psychological states because we know how the brain is often fooled by optical illusions and hallucinations. A hallucination of an eagle could make you just as excited as seeing a real one. You are still excited, but the reason you are excited may not actually exist. You just think it does.
On the other hand, me posting "I saw an eagle in the Alps today" entails a proposition that is either true or false, and its truth can be verified, namely by checking whether there are eagles in the Alps and whether Lucas really went there today. Now let's say I go hiking but don't spot an eagle, which does not cause me any excitement. Surely it is the height of absurdity to suggest that the absence of that excitement is true.
I think I can see the issue here. Excited is a label we put on a certain brain state. Philosopher at City University of New York, Richard Brown, in Philosophical Psychology writes, quote, "Brain states are patterns of synchronous neural firing which reflects the electrical face of the brain," end quote. The source for this is in the description. So if you have that brain state, then it is true you would be considered excited. If you didn't have that brain state, it would not be true that you were excited. We are granting that psychological state was the case for the sake of the hypothetical, just like we would grant that you exist. So I don't agree here.
And that's because, again, only claims can have truth value.
Okay, but what is happening here is that you are saying that a psychological state is the case. It is either true or not true that one is currently in a specific psychological state. Again, we granted that it was true that you were excited. That brain state happened. It seems like you were simply trying to put out how one feels as a brute fact, when in fact this isn't quite the case. Thoughts, feelings, and beliefs themselves may be non-factive attitudes in that it doesn't matter whether what they are attached to is true or false. They still exist. It tells you nothing of the truth of the attached proposition. As you said, you felt excited because you saw an eagle. Your feelings existed irrespective of the truth of the proposition of seeing the eagle. You believe you saw it and your brain reacted accordingly. That's what the brain does. The idea of factive and non-factive attitudes may be a bit complicated for this video. For more information, check out Timothy Williamson's book, Knowledge and Its Limits.
Only claims can be true or false. This does not and cannot apply to psychological states. Even less so to psychological states that don't actually happen.
Put simply, if you hold a belief, that belief is either true or false. But believing is not a true or false thing. The same goes for not believing. You could not believe something that is true, or you could not believe something that is false. Believing or not believing in and of themselves do not hold a truth value. It seems like you're simply talking about a non-factive verb versus a factive verb.
Which brings us right back to the atheist's claim that atheism means the absence of the claim God exists in the atheist's brain.
This is still an oversimplification of the position to the point of being wrong. Atheists do not claim this. Maybe some do, but they would be a tremendous minority.
Categorically speaking, this turns atheism into exactly the same thing as me not experiencing excitement after not spotting an eagle on my hike. But then again, who would even think about discussing whether psychological states that don't happen are true or false?
If I grant all of this, then yes, not experiencing a belief is categorically the same as not experiencing an emotion after not having a not expected experience. By this, are you getting to the point that atheism is not a truth claim? If you are, you'd be 100% right and be the first apologist to get that. Oh, I hope so.
And so, if an atheist defines him or herself essentially as a person whose psyche doesn't feature the thought God exists, it follows that it is logically impossible for their atheism to be true, because psychological states simply have no business with truth value.
Of course, it also follows that it is logically impossible for atheism to be false as well. As you stated before, not believing is a psychological state and therefore does not have a truth claim. Are you gonna miss your own point?
Now, if that's atheism's ordeal, how could it possibly make any logical sense for a person to both claim that they care about truth and to call themselves atheists at the same time?
You're making a category error here. We can apply this to literally any non-belief. I'm going to guess that you don't believe in something, let's just say, for example, unicorns. Whether you do or don't believe they exist does not matter for the example. Take anything you don't believe exists if this is insufficient. Not believing in unicorns is saying that unicorns exist is not in your brain or mind. Based on your reasoning here, it follows that it is logically impossible for a unicornism to be true. No, really, take everything that Lucas says in this video and replace atheism with a unicornism. We could even apply it to any belief as well, since belief itself is not a truth claim either, but a psychological state. And theism is saying God exists as part of a brain state in the theist's mind. Then just like the feeling of excitement, the belief in something is just a psychological state, which means by your own logic, how could it possibly make any logical sense for a person to both claim that they care about the truth and to call themselves theists? I think Stephen Woodford of Rationality Rules calls this a Trojan horse argument. I could be mistaken about this though. His own argument debunks his entire position.
So if you're an atheist and care about logic, here is your dilemma. Option 1. You may continue to define atheism as a psychological state, by virtue of which you logically and conclusively wave goodbye to the possibility that atheism might actually be true. However, you're then entangling yourself in a self-contradiction if you keep making counter-arguments to theistic arguments because of the simple fact that counter-arguments are claims to truth. And how is it consistent for an atheist to make claims to truth when atheism has nothing to do with truth in the first place? The other option is this. Atheists may accept the classical definition of atheism as being an actual claim to truth. That is, the claim that God's existence isn't plausible, or if you want, the denial of the claim that God's existence is plausible. Armed with this definition, atheists face no consistency problem when countering theistic arguments. However, this also means that there is no more running away from the responsibility to offer evidence for their own position.
This seems like a weird attempt to force atheists into accepting some burden of proof. Atheism does not adopt a burden of proof any more than not accepting that werewolves exist adopts a burden of proof. That is another thing that, by Lucas's logic, doesn't make sense. Not accepting that werewolves exist is logically impossible, therefore you must take a stance on the existence of werewolves? If you don't provide evidence for werewolves not existing, then you must accept that werewolves exist. Thanks, reductio ad absurdum.
So what type of atheist are you? The psychological state type atheist? Or an atheist with the guts to admit that his or her atheism is an actual claim to truth? If it's the latter, you stand on solid logical ground to fire away with your arguments against God's existence, and I'm looking forward to your comments. If you're just a psychological state type atheist, you're of course just as welcome to comment and fire away with your objections to God's existence. However, by virtue of doing so, you'd be throwing out your commitment to logic. Or to put it differently, you'd be as credible as someone who argues that my excitement about seeing that eagle is not true, whatever that means.
And that's it for his video, minus his non-relevant promotion at the end here. A link to the original video is in the description as well, so you can see the full context for yourself, though I didn't really cut anything. So let's sum up his video here and see if we can make sense of it. Atheism, by modern usage, is the lack of belief in a god or gods. A lack of belief means that the positive proposition is not found in the brain or mind. Things that are unable to consider the proposition of the existence of a god are also atheists because that proposition is not found in their brain or mind either. Psychological states don't have a truth value, they just are. Feeling excitement is a psychological state. Not feeling excitement is categorically the same as not believing something. Therefore, it is logically impossible to say that not believing something is true. Therefore, it is logically impossible to be an atheist by modern usage and still care about what is true. Does this make sense to you? I think I got it as close to right as I can. In a more formal structure, breaking everything down, it looks like this. 1. Atheism is a lack of belief in a god. 2. Belief or lack of belief are brain states and therefore do not have a truth value. 3. Therefore, atheism does not have a truth value. 4. Therefore, you cannot care about truth and be an atheist. This is as close to a simplified argument as I could get. I can grant 1, 2, and 3. The issue is that 4 is a non sequitur. If something doesn't have a truth value, then it is unaffected by the truth or falsity of the attached proposition. This means that one can believe or not believe X proposition and still care about the truth. One can believe something that turns out to be incorrect and still care about the truth. That's it for this one. What did you think? Do you think that truth of whether one believes, thinks, ponders, or doubts a proposition has any bearing on the truth of the proposition? Or do you think that you need to believe in a god to care about what is true? Let me know in the comments below. This video was a bit more challenging than other videos I've done, barring the entirely presuppositionalist video. This video started off simple, but then dove sharply into the philosophy of psychology, which is very complicated. In fact, there are entire college courses on just that subject alone. This made addressing it in a meaningful way in such a limited time quite the challenge. Do you agree with my assessment of the argument, or would you have worded it differently? Let me know in the comments. I very much enjoy reading all of the ideas and perspectives you all bring. Now, the psychological state of liking this video is neither true nor false, but the demonstration of such a psychological state is shown through the hitting of the like button. However, it logically follows that if you like what I do here, how could you possibly care about the truth of what I say and not be a subscriber to my channel? Additionally, you could initiate the same excitement of seeing an eagle while hiking through the Alps for as low as $1 a month by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/DarkOfAllTrades. And as always, keep learning.